All right, to get us started, our moderator is Andrew Pavord. I know many of you are familiar with him. He's the training coordinator for Budget LoB. He's the former federal budget and financial management leader at US, SBA, Treasury, and VA. Andy, we will turn it over to you.
Good morning. Today we're going to focus on an introduction to OMB Circular A-11. And our objectives is to provide an overview of the topics covered in OMB Circular A-11. This circular has over 1,000 pages and goes into very in-depth detail on a myriad of subjects. And we're just going to give you kind of an overview to kind of let you know what's in the document, what's in the circular, and kind of where you can go to find specific issues. In the process of this, we're going to introduce you to selected terms and concepts that are used in federal budgeting, because one of the main things A11 does is define key terms and concepts. So here's the agenda. We're just going to go and follow the parts of A11, and we're just going to kind of walk through in a little bit of detail, as much as time permitting, for each of these parts. But we're also going to do something a little different. This is an experiment to try to add some interest to this class. We're going to play A11 Jeopardy. We're going to play after we cover each part. We're going to have a quick little game, and we're going to ask people who want to play to enter their names into the chat, and then Janice will select the first 3 people who enter their names, and those will be the contestants for that round. Once we select the contestants, the first person will select the category and amount, just like in regular Jeopardy. After that, the question is revealed, and contestants will enter their answers into the chat. The first person to enter the correct answer wins the amount for that question. We will continue for 3 or 4 minutes per A11 Jeopardy slide. So after each section, there's a Jeopardy slide like you see here with it, which has the terms and concepts and the category and the amounts. We are going to keep score. Janice is going to keep score, and the person who wins the most points will be crowned the 2023 A11 Jeopardy champion and receive a free mug with a value of no more than $20 per federal gift regulations. So we hope this may add some excitement and interest to this class. Oh, the other thing I will say is that all the questions in the Jeopardy that only address material that is covered in this class. So there's no, you can win this round even if you've never read A11 before. So everything is covered, will be subject to the questions. So pay attention and win your Jeopardy championship. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our 2 instructors, Shalini Benson and Courtney Timberlake. Both of them have experience working at OMB. Courtney was the assistant director at OMB who was responsible for A11, and Shalini served at OMB and also at agencies such as FEMA, where she was in charge of emergency funds. So I'll turn it over to, I think Courtney's going first. So thank you.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me on this session. So making sense of the federal budget process. If you've been working in budget for a little while, you're probably still asking that question about how to make sense of it. What we'll talk about today, it'll cover a lot of topics, as Andy mentioned. A11 is a very large document, so we will try to hit on some of the key highlights and things, words and terms and concepts that you need to know. But you'll be able to do research that's most applicable to a problem that you're trying to solve, for example, or a question you're trying to answer. So terms and concepts, there's a wide variety of terms and concepts on this slide. There are many more, as noted at the bottom. You want to talk about apportionments and unobligated balances, max data entry, preparation of budget estimates, basically to make sure that your agencies can operate the programs that they are required to operate and implement. But it also includes not just the hard data and numbers, but it's also about strategic planning. It's about what to do, what you can and can't do during a continuing resolution when Congress, most of the time, it takes far more time than they need to come to an agreement on what the budget should be. It's also the federal performance framework. How do you make sure that the programs that agencies are operating and providing assistance to, that you're getting good value for money. There are also a few other things that will be mentioned in here. Anti-Deficiency Act violations. Congress requires that you obligate no more than the amount that you've been appropriated. Going over that amount is an Anti-Deficiency Act violation. You want to avoid that at all costs. And if you are brand new to this, talk to your friends about Anti-Deficiency Act violations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shalini for her additions.
Thanks, Courtney. It is a delight to be here with all of you and to see like 380 people excited about budget. Maybe you question that assumption whether or not you're excited about budget, but I hope you are by the end of this because we are really excited about budget. And so as Andy mentioned, I've got 20-ish odd years of experience in budget. I worked at 5 different agencies. My career went inverse to the budget cycle, starting at to budget formulation at OMB. And I worked at the ODNI, Department of Energy, NIH, and at the end at FEMA, where I was also involved in a program office. And in each and every one of those jobs, what I would tell new budget analysts is the number one thing that is going to help you in your job is knowing A-11. At least know the table of contents, right? And we're going to go a step deeper today and actually go through what is in A-11. But if you know what's in A-11, then you are steps ahead in being able to actually deliver on budget work, right? This is our guidance. This tells us how to do formulation, how to do execution, and it levels the playing field between big agencies and small agencies. Because if you are ever worried about what does OMB want, what do they think good is, they tell you. And A-11 is where they tell you. So that's what we're going to go through today. We're super pumped about it. Hope you are too. To just do a quick check of who's in the room. It's going to be a little hard. We're not going to use the chat because there's a lot of you. But if you could hover over those reaction buttons, if you are in your first 5 years of working in budget, just give us a thumbs up. And let's see those come across the screen. So if you're in your first 5 years, give us some sort of reaction that lets us know using your reaction buttons. Okay. And I'm actually not seeing those come across. So maybe that's not quite working as intended. Courtney, can you see that?
No.
All right.
Just about to say that. Yep. Hold on. Wait. Let me try. Hold on. Okay.
It's many of them.
Okay. And thank you, Janice. Appreciate that. How about if you were in years 5 to 10 of budget? Okay, now I'm seeing things come up. I guess I've got a weird lag. And how about 10 to 20? All right, I see a bunch of hands there too. I'm seeing not all of them, but I'm seeing hand raises. And how about if you have more than 20 years in budget? So let me just do a quick break and say thank you for your service, right? Here's what we know about our field. We know it is often busy. We know a lot happens. And we know that you all, we're going to talk about budget systems, we're going to talk about budget procedures, but we know that each and every one of you, you're the people that get things done. You're the people that take where your program wants to go. You apply budgetary terms and concepts to help make sure that the government delivers what it needs to. And that is no easy job. So we'll try and end with that too, but please know at the beginning, we thank you for your service. And Courtney, I went a little all over, not quite just on this slide. Let me turn it back to you.
No, all good. Thanks, Shalini. As we've talked about, OMB Circular A-11 is your guide. That is your reference document, because as I mentioned and as Shalini emphasized, this is about everything. It's not just about the budget numbers. It's about about program performance and how the budget fits into that. But A11 is again massive and covers lots of ground. So make sure that you have that bookmarked for when you need to look something up. And it's essentially the main reference material for just about everything related to budget. How A11 covers the process for agencies to communicate with Congress on the budget. And this is very important for you guys to know, because your agency, whether it's you or your bosses, will have to at some point talk to, for example, the Hill on the budget requests that the agencies are making. And you want to be able to communicate appropriately with those folks, and you want to make sure that you are providing the right information. So A11 is your Bible on that. Not just the process for agencies to communicate, but also what they can and cannot communicate. It provides the guidance to agencies on preparing the numbers that go into the budget, what the agency's budget requests are for each individual program and potentially each individual project within a program. And lots of guidance on that. Guidance on agencies on executing the budget when agencies actually obligate and outlay funds for the programs and projects that they are supporting. And as Shalini mentioned, for performance framework, there's also the President's Management Agenda. There's a lot of stuff that you guys as program people need to know. You're not going to memorize everything. You can't. It's way too much. But you at least need to know when to go to a part of A11 to get the right guidance, and then you can go to other people that you will probably need to talk to about implementing that guidance. So mostly when people talk about A11, it's the circular. Just as a flag, sometimes people use A11 as it's the budget system. The OMB has the budget system that agencies put all their info into. It's also called A11, Max A11, less common usage. And as I mentioned, agencies are required to put their data into the database for the production of the president's budget. And those numbers need to be correct. They need to be the expected numbers, the numbers that OMB has approved. So just keep that in mind. We can go to the next slide, I think. Shalini, do you have anything you want to add?
Yep, I think that's awesome.
Right. So so A11 guidance is considered authoritative. It's not a law, but the guidance is considered authoritative. It's rooted in statutes. So there is a statutory basis for what's in A11. You can see the statutes. I'm going to just briefly mention the Anti-Deficiency Act. Again, that is, you can't obligate more in funds. You cannot obligate more money than Congress has appropriated to you. And people have gone to jail, although very few, for violating the Anti-Deficiency Act. It is so technically, that is technically the punishment for violating the Anti-Deficiency Act. In most of the time, the vast majority of the time, It's just an accidental error, but to make sure that the money is going where it's supposed to go, there are legal penalties. And as I mentioned, Government Performance and Results Act. It's about, how do you work with folks to improve your programs and to make sure that you are delivering the services that are needed and what Congress has approved, and to make sure that the agencies are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they do it well, and they do it with an eye towards the finances and how much things are costing. A-11 is also reviewed by OMB's Office of General Counsel to ensure consistency with broader laws. So, next slide, please.
Hey, if I could add just one bit
Oh,
to that
sorry,
slide.
go ahead. Yes, please.
I just put the link to A11 in the chat. So one of the most awesome things about A11 is that it's accessible. It's easy to read. It's written for people to be able to understand it. And give me a thumbs up or reaction if you know about your own agency's budget formulation or execution guidance. Your own agency is giving you guidance on, hey, here's how we do our internal process. Okay. Yeah, our agencies tell us how to do things, and that is supplemental to A11. And sometimes we might have a difference in what our agency says. A11's ground truth, right? That's why it's accessible. That's why it's not firewalled. That's why anyone, anywhere, if you have a question about what's in it, what does OMB say is the right way to do personnel costing and budgeting, you can go look it up. Back over to you, Courtney. Oh, wait, you're on mute.
Thank you. Much better than just talking to myself, talking to everybody else. Thank you for key guidance again. Just reemphasizing that A11 provides guidance for preparing the president's budget for submission to Congress. That's very, very important, and it takes up the entire budget process. Is obviously year-round, but there are a number of steps that take months to go from start to finish. And with Congress having difficulty enacting a budget on time every year, the time frame gets longer and longer. So what does the budget cover? Just want to talk about a little bit about the budget process. Again, the legal requirements, the agencies that are covered by the budget. There have historically been a couple of agencies that are not necessarily covered by the budget. I'm not going to talk about those because they are by far the exceptions to the rule. But there are a couple of agencies that are technically not covered by the budget. Agencies, when they submit their budgets to OMB and then OMB submits the entire budget to Congress, that's not the last step of the budget process, even aside from congressional appropriations committees. There is a mid-session review of the budget that basically comes out in the July to August timeframe, where there are updates to economic assumptions and to estimates that are based on those economic assumptions. So there's a mid-session review of the budget. So not only are you doing budget data entry into the Max A11 system in the winter, but you are also in the summer asked by OMB to update those estimates for changes in economics or for changes in programs. There's a wide variety of reasons, and I could spend probably 2 hours just talking about what those reasons are, but I won't. There are also the oversight agencies that take a look at what has been proposed in the president's budget. So, for example, Treasury is also involved in the process, and it monitors the status of funds, how much money is going into and out of the government during the fiscal year. The Congressional Budget Office also plays a role. They are Congress's Budget Office, as you might guess from the name of the agency. But CBO has a different set of economics than OMB does, for example. CBO will also have different assumptions about how the programs will operate. But CBO is also another entity that says this is how much the proposals are expected to cost the government to implement if enacted. The Government Accountability Office, GAO, they come in and look at how agencies have implemented their programs. Have they implemented them consistent with laws, consistent with guidance? And GAO reports out to the public on those. There are, if you're brand new, that will be that is something that you should be aware of. If you've spent any length of time working in the federal government, you have heard about GAO already, because they are one of the government's auditors. So the budget also covers, okay, the laws governing the process, talks about the formulation and execution phases, the laws that govern. If you encounter a term that is unfamiliar to you, there's a set of definitions of terms and the underlying budget concepts in A11. It talks about, again, what's included and not included in the budget, and scoring legislation. Again, scoring is very important. The estimated costs of taking an action or getting a law enacted can make or break a proposal, for example. There's also a lot of management guidance in OMB Circular A-11, not just the budget guidance. The most recent versions of A-11 include new subsections on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, which is a high priority for the administration. There's also guidance on learning agendas. The idea is that that federal government staff should be continuously learning and trying to understand better how they can do their work and serve the public better. Shalini, I'm guessing you would like to add to that, and you should, please.
So you're great. I don't have anything to add. I will say we are going to go through each of the major sections. So if you hear something like a term or concept or scoring and you're a little confused about that, Courtney explained it was the delta, but we do have additional slides on each section coming
up. Okay. The timing. When does OMB Circular A-11 get updated? So you should keep an eye out. Generally, OMB tries to issue Circular A-11 updates in midsummer. So as I wrote in here, late July, early August. As you might have noticed, that also collides with the timing of mid-session review. So it may or may not come out in July or August, but that is when OMB aims for it. So make a note in your calendar about when the OMB a Circular A-11 update might come out. Most recent one is August 11th from 2023. One other thing that you should know, OMB does actually want feedback from agencies. Sometimes it feels like that's not true, but OMB really does particularly want feedback on changes to A11, things that might make a concept or a term clearer, this is the right time. Right after the budget has gone up to the Hill, OMB will generally put out a request to agencies for any suggested changes to guidance or to A11 generally. And as a staff person, work with your managers to figure out what comments you might want to submit in trying to follow the guidance that's in A11. It can be very dense. It can be not very clear. And the OMB folks, having been one of those OMB folks working on highly technical things and concepts, you know, the OMB folks might not always put things down that are as clear as they could be. And if you are an agency person trying to follow the guidance, obviously it's to your benefit to let OMB know when things might be confusing or you need additional guidance or more tailored guidance. So please do, OMB does take your views into consideration, I promise. I've seen that process and it does happen. They may not do everything that you'd like them to do, but they do try. And you should also keep an eye out for any potential off-cycle updates. That happens very rarely, but just keep an eye out every so often. All right, next slide, please. So why should I care about OMB Circular A-11? Like I said, it's considered authoritative. Staff, not just the OMB folks, but agency staff should be well-versed in what those requirements are. There are some other topics. There are some broader topics that are included in A11. There are appendices that are generally on specific and important topics. For example, scorekeeping guidelines. How do you estimate the costs of the programs that you're going to be implementing and the cost of new legislation for to implement potentially new programs or change the way that a program is operated? So there are very specific scorekeeping guidelines that apply to that. There's a section on capital planning. If you are an agency that has a lot of field offices, for example, it's very important to stay up to date on the guidance on capital planning. Budgetary treatment of lease purchases and leases of capital assets. That is one of the more complicated sections. It's a challenging topic. You also have a section that's budgeting for capital asset acquisitions. So spending money, potentially a lot of money, for example, for a field office or for or for improvements to an existing real estate portfolio. There are also other appendices that include very important information on budget execution. So you need to know what the format of the SF-132, which is the request for apportionment, the SF-133, which is the report on budget execution, as well as Schedule P and the Statement on Budgetary Resources, SBR, funds control regulations, and again, the capital planning guide. Great, next slide, please. So this is a very peaceful photo designed to calm you down now that I have given you a high-level overview of a huge amount of information. This lovely meadow is representative of how you guys will be feeling once you have mastered Circular A-11. And these are the various parts. It runs from general information to the budget estimates to what happens after the budget has been submitted to Congress post-transmittal. Then the next step of budget execution. There's also a section on federal credit, which is a highly specialized topic. And then the federal performance framework, which is applicable to all programs. So part one, general information. So let's see. So let's go to the next slide. Let's start that off. Okay. So we will continue getting into the meat of these things. The overview of the budget process. And Shalini, I hope that you will jump in on here since this is sort of just a big overview, and I may have a different perspective on the budget than you do. But what is the budget? When people talk about the budget, it's the president's budget. I'm sure that Congress members and their staff have a different view of that, but from the OMB perspective, the budget is the president's budget that is submitted to the Congress. The request is submitted theoretically in February of each year. Sometimes it takes a little longer for a wide variety of reasons. There are 4 volumes. You have the main budget volume that contains the budget message and other broad statements of policy. It's to say, here are the broad outlines of what we think, what we, the administration, thinks should be should be funded, how much it should be funded, how it should be funded. The budget appendix is the exact opposite of that high-level overview. The budget appendix, it has incredibly detailed information. And if the appendix is it could probably, I don't know if you guys can see this the way that I'm sitting, but this is basically the width of the budget appendix. And you, the agencies, are the ones who are responsible for getting that data into the database and so that the right numbers are delivered to Congress. Analytical perspectives is more of a thought exercise. It's about policies and principles for a wide variety of topics, particular topics. Historical tables. If you want past budget data, the historical tables volume will get you there. And as basically as I've said before, this information is from you, the staff. The information that is in the budget is prepared by the agencies. OMB may have 1 or 2 of their own accounts to put data into the database, but the vast majority of the information that is in the budget is submitted by you guys. So that's why it's important that the data be correct, that and that you understand what that data means, because agencies are the ones who get asked what that data means. Shalini, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, what I'd add on this slide is it's important to know that if there's ever a difference between what you publish in your congressional justification and the printed budget volumes, first of all, there shouldn't be a difference, but we all know life happens and sometimes that does happen. This is authoritative, right? This is the budget. So what is in the OMB volumes wins, right? So if there is a difference between your CJ and the budget, this is what we authoritatively mean by the president's budget. And this is the script you need to stick to. So it is particularly important that it is right when you're working with OMB. And yeah, I think that's it.
Shalini, have you ever seen instances where there have been differences? I'm not asking you to call out any agency in particular, but
Indeed, I have. And part of the complexity, right, is these volumes can be in, particularly the appendix, it's in millions, right? And your CJs are down to the thousands. And so sometimes you wind up in differences of rounding. And the president's budget is authoritative and is the budget.
So I'll talk a little bit about the budget process. You've got several phases of the budget process, which I've alluded to. You've got the budget formulation, which is when OMB works with the agencies to determine what the budget request is going to be, all the way down to a very detailed level. But the formulation process is when the president submits the budget to the Congress for consideration. Congress then takes the budget. Sometimes they will ignore the budget altogether, or at least they will say that they're ignoring the budget altogether. In reality, Congress does, in fact, read those documents that you produce for the president's budget, and they will use that information. So even when it sounds like Congress is throwing the budget away, throwing it over their shoulder, and it's dead on arrival, it's never, ever dead on arrival. So be prepared for questions from your congressional committees. as the Congress members and their staffs are looking at what the budget has proposed, and they are also keeping an eye out for programs and projects that are of particular interest to an individual Congress member. Once Congress has put together appropriations bills, you should also be looking to see what is in those bills compared to what was requested, and making sure that that your boss knows when there are differences. I mean, this is an annual process, so folks who have been around for a couple of years have seen this process over and over again. That Congress will have lots of questions. That it is their job to understand what it is that the president is proposing, and you know, the line that has been used for many years is the president proposes and Congress disposes, which it's a disposition as opposed to just throwing, you know, the whole budget away. Once Congress and the administration have agreed to funding levels for every program in the budget, which, and of course the budget is supposed to be the budget is supposed to be enacted well before the next fiscal year has begun. But as you can see, continuing resolutions have been in effect many times over the years because Congress cannot agree on what Congress and the president cannot agree on what the levels are for any individual programs or an agency in general. Once agencies have received their budgets, once the budgets for each agency have been enacted, the execution phase kicks in, and agencies have to apportion funds. OMB has to apportion funds so that agencies can implement their programs and then do the reporting, the SF-133s, for example, so that you have the whole cycle of proposing the budget, enacting the budget, and executing the budget, and making sure that Congress knows that the money that they have provided is being obligated and spent for the intended purposes. Shalini, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, I'll share about this section. So this, we're specifically talking about section 10.5. And what's really cool about A11 is budget is so schedule driven, right? Is it gives you a sense of seasonality of when each of these things are due. So each of our agencies has their own budget calendar, their own deadlines that back up from these deadlines. So you will see very few hard and fast dates in A11, but what you will see is seasonality of when these things happen, when they're due. And we are so schedule driven that is particularly helpful, particularly if you ever have a OMB wants it by this date. You get to go back into A11 and check and see, oh, is that really the date they want it? Okay, here's when my end of year apportionments are due, or carryover apportionments. Yep, that's the date written. So because there are very few dates that are hard and fast in A11, the ones that are there, you need to pay attention to. And I'm just going to do a quick, I know we've got some hands raised. I put in the chat that if you have a question as we're going along, maybe type it into the chat, because we do want to make sure that we're answering your questions and hearing from you, and are mindful of the fact that we've got a lot to cover and there's a lot of people in the room. So I hope that works for you all to just put your questions in the chat. Courtney, back over to you.
Great, thanks. I will just briefly mention the other item on this slide, which is mid-session review. And this is what I mentioned earlier. There are updates to the budget estimates. However, you as an agency this is not a time, I'm trying to say this the right way. Mid-session review is not an opportunity to change your budget request. It is to update for economic assumptions. There may be things in the program that result in technical re-estimates. Those are not just because your agency head wants to request a different amount for a program.
Courtney, it sounds like you've run into that before.
Entirely possible. I mean, agencies are generally good about that, but sometimes there is a request from policy officials who are not aware of the overall process. They may say, "Oh, hey, this is a time when I can do something, when I can make a different request," and that is not in fact the case. And I apologize, but I'm being told that my computer has to reboot. So I'm going to do that. Shawnee, are you open to taking over the next section? I apologize.
Yep, I'll keep going. We'll see you momentarily.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, I'll be right back.
We roll with it. All right, section 10 continues in 10.7, going over the key players in the budget process, and it specifically talks about the role and interrelationship of OMB, Treasury, specifically the Bureau of Fiscal Service, and explains what they do. In this whole federal process, it goes through the role of CBO as well as the Government Accountability Office. So if you ever have any confusion or are looking for more clarification of who does what here, section 10.7 is your place to go to be able to find that. Next slide, please. Then we get to section 15. Again, we're all still in part 1, going over basic budget laws. So everything that we do in the budget cycle, everything that we do in the budget process is based upon the separation of powers founded in the Constitution. And you will see an overview of some of the laws that brought us to where we are now and why we do what we do. And we're just going to do a quick overview of some of these laws that you see up on the slide. Next slide, please. So first we begin with the Budget and Accounting Act. So before we had the Budget and Accounting Act in 1921, the slide says, agencies used to just submit their budget requests to Congress. You can imagine the level of chaos that would happen if each agency was submitting its own request, and the executive branch is supposed to control these, and then Congress is individually deciding on each agency. And Congress said, this isn't the way we want this to go. So the Budget and Accounting Procedures Act said, okay, President, I want to create OMB, then it was called the Bureau of Budget, or BOB, to be able to oversee these requests and come up with one executive branch request. So about just over 100 years old, that's where our current process came about. It's designed to make sure that the executive branch is making trade-offs and decisions and speaking with one voice when they give a request to Congress. So Congress knows this is what the administration wants. This is what the president wants. We've made trade-offs while we built this. This has been considered. And here is our whole executive branch administration request. It is a policy document, right? We've set the schedule to be the State of the Union happens in January, and then the budget comes later in February saying there's policies, there's priorities that we laid out in the State of the Union. The budget's going to tell me how I get those done. And next slide, please. So the Budget and Accounting Act specified when we need to submit the budget by. I think we've all seen in recent years that we haven't always stuck to this early February date on submitting the budget, but it is in statute. That is when the president is supposed to submit the budget. And it goes forward and says in the law, each budget shall include a budget message and summary and supporting information. So there's 4 volumes that Courtney went over earlier on the budget, the appendix, historical perspectives, analytic perspectives. That's the budget, message, summary, and supporting information. And that's how we're showing our expenditures receipts for the past year through the 4th year. Again, it's in statute that we are showing multiple fiscal years when we submit the budget request. And information on debt, financial information, and information on employment levels, right? Here's again, in statute, why if you are familiar with Max A-11 data entry, you've got that specific schedule around number of full-time equivalents or positions in your program. We're doing that because that's the law. That's where we were told where we need to, how we need to do this. All right. Next slide, please. And how does Congress, there you go. Thanks, Andy. So after we had the Accounting and Procedures Act, we then went through and said, okay, the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 spells out this ideal process on how the budget is supposed to be approved, right? Ideal process, ideally a concurrent resolution in the spring, total receipts and outlays by major category. You may hear the phrase 302B allocation. That's what that is referring to. Then we want legislation authorizing changes in mandatory spending consistent with that budget resolution. And then at the end, we're making sure those discretionary appropriations are also falling into play with what we set as our total allocation. And as Courtney mentioned earlier, ideally, this is happening before the end of the preceding fiscal year, so that we're starting the year on October 1st with this new budget in place. I'm going to pause because I see a comment in the chat. Story of why we gained the OMB might be interesting, since the very reasons used were brought up during the last administration. Yeah, right. So OMB is supposed to be that centralized, consistent administration trade-off view with a sense of how much do we want to spend? How much do we think we're bringing in terms of receipts? How much do we think outlays are going to be? And that's where even what Courtney said, that sometimes while the budget may appear dead on arrival, Congress is mindful of the information in it. Your work is never wasted. It is never wasted. We know that in the budget cycle, that if we work on something, a proposal, a policy, Congress doesn't enact it, there's always a chance for it to come back around. All right. So after we go through, here's the ideal, the way it's supposed to work, some other super important laws that you need to know about when we think about, oh, Nixon reasoning. Yeah, right, 1974. All that happened at the same time. Or the Anti-Deficiency Act, Courtney mentioned the ADA requires OMB to apportion and monitor spending, because that way our total funds control, it's not just what Congress approves, but it is also OMB controls, and then your internal agency funds control as well, lays out your entire administrative control of funds. The ADA is where we talk about our favorite things, which are, see if I can do this as though it was to a song. I can make it to time, purpose, amount. That's what the ADA governs. Then go through the Impoundment Control Act. So 1974, a lot happened in 1974. Requires the president to notify Congress if the executive branch is going to defer or rescind authority, because Congress has the power of the purse. We also saw this come up in the context of President Trump's first impeachment as well. And so if anyone ever says budget's boring, by all means, it is not. These laws matter a great deal. Courtney, welcome back. We are just going through basic budget laws. We have covered the Budget and Accounting Procedures Act of 1921, the Congressional Budget Act 1974. Said here's how we do what we're supposed to. And I was just talking about the ADA and the Impoundment Control Act. The Economy Act. So how many of you out there do reimbursable work? Give me a thumbs up or a reaction, or know that your agency does reimburse. Yeah, right? We saw this line up. The Economy Act is what gives us the permission to be able to have federal agencies do work for each other, right? We have to fully reimburse for the total cost of those goods and services. But here's where it makes more sense. Like, how many of us get paychecks that are cut by DFAS or USDA, even though we don't work there? It's the Economy Act that lets us do that. And then lastly, last important budget law before we get to the next slide on performance to know about is the Miscellaneous Receipts Act. Every dollar we bring in as part of the federal government needs to be deposited and accounted for as soon as practical, right? We can't just hold on to money. It matters a great deal that we are good financial stewards of not only spending, but also receipts. And Courtney, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Right. I will keep smurfing a little bit.
Yep.
The last set of budget laws that's particularly important to know about, and here's where there's a whole section on A11 in this as well, is performance, right? We had GIPRA in 1993. So both GIPRA and the GIPRA Modernization Act of 2010 are designed to get at Shalini's way of looking at it. One real thing. Can we track marginal cost to marginal benefit? Can we say, hey, program X, I've got an extra $1 million. If I give it to you, what will you achieve? Right? What's the difference? How does a change in spending affect your mission achievement? Right? That's what we're designed to say, is to connect the dollars with the how and why. Right? How does an increase help you? How does a cut hurt you? Can we connect your mission achievement with your spending? And particularly the GIPRA Modernization Act also gives us language to talk about cross-cutting goals, annual performance goals, and performance results, and how all of that works together in a way that is designed to make it so that performance and budget aren't two parallel tracks, right? They're not parallel tracks. We want them to intersect. We want them to be connected. And that's the goal. Courtney?
Great. And here we go. We are back to we're now back to talking in budget. The performance. I would emphasize that the performance information that agencies collect and provide to the public is very important, particularly in a time when the parties in Congress can't agree on a lot of things. It is a useful exercise for both Congress and the administration to talk about what can and can't get done when there seems to be gridlock over how much money to provide to different programs. So being able to, as Shalini pointed out, being able to describe what a program is doing, how well it's doing it, is it meeting the objectives? Very, very important stuff, particularly in a time where there is gridlock and a lack of agreement over how to spend, how much money to spend. Talking about how well a program is operating is very important to both agencies and to members of Congress. Would you agree with that, Shalini?
Absolutely, yes. And one other thing to just highlight on this slide is the picture that Andy dropped in of the Rosetta Stone, right? So this is where budgetary terms and concepts, we can have very precise meaning to the words that we use, and it can be challenging if you're new to it. I know a lot of you aren't new to it. I used to back in the day when I didn't have a computer with me. I'm admitting I started working before we had phones, right? I used to have at the back of my clipboard a printout of the budgetary terms in A11. So as I walked around to meetings, I could just flip to it. You don't have to do that now, but you should certainly have it bookmarked and easily accessible if you ever want to go back to what does a particular thing mean, or I'm not sure what somebody means by this.
Right.
And scoring
Okay.
is all you.
So I used to work in the budget review division and BRD, and that is the division that works with the OMB examiners as well as agencies on scoring legislation. I mentioned earlier, it's very important to have an estimate of how much a provision of law is going to cost, and that's whether it's whether it's in an appropriations act, whether it's in an authorizing act. How much a new program or a change in an existing program is estimated to cost can make or break whether or not that action is taken. So just to go over the definition, process of estimating the change in government spending and how much is collected by the government. It's not just the money going out from the government, but it's money coming into the government as well. The amount that results from that enacted or proposed legislation compared to what it would be if that legislation were not passed. So basically just, okay, you have a program, there is a provision introduced in Congress to change that program in some way. There is often, though not always, a cost or savings associated with making that change. The scorekeepers are OMB and CBO. As I mentioned earlier, both OMB and CBO will estimate how much a provision will cost or how much revenue a provision will raise. And again, those two agencies, OMB and CBO, they may use different economic assumptions and different technical assumptions about how the program operates. So estimating the cost of scoring occurs, again, during budget formulation when making the estimates about how the changes in the programs that the president is proposing. And then scoring also occurs, again, through the congressional process and enactment. So in the legislative branch, as well as the executive, there is some legislation that you should be aware of because it's still in effect. There are categories of spending, the BEDCA. So there's mandatory, spending is divided into mandatory and discretionary. For mandatory, it is subject to the Pay-As-You-Go Act of 2010. That is a permanent law where the costs of changes to mandatory programs are made and what are the costs or savings associated with those changes that are made. There is a scorecard. I will not go into great detail on this, although I could spend probably an hour on it. It's a lot, but just know that there is a tally of the costs or savings associated with mandatory programs. In years past, there have been limits on discretionary spending. So those are the annually appropriated funds through the Appropriations Act. But those are the two categories. You will hear about discretionary spending and mandatory spending. And those are called the BEDCA categories, as I mentioned. So when you hear somebody talking in those acronyms, that's what that means. Next slide, please. Okay. Can agency staff go up to the Hill and talk to their appropriations committee staff, subcommittee staff, and just talk about the program? What the answer is, no. The administration wants to make sure that communications with the Hill as well as with outside parties, that those discussions are consistent with what the presidential policy is that was included in the president's budget. So you, as a staff person, as well as others within your agency, even including leadership, you still need to be cleared to have those discussions, and particularly during the budget development process. It's very important that the budget deliberations are considered to be confidential. They're confidential. They are not. For example, potential proposals should not be discussed until the president has made a decision on that proposal, and it is included in the president's budget. So both the nature and amounts of what the president decides should be in the budget. The materials are confidential. Do not release the decisions outside of your agency until the budget is transmitted to the Congress. OMB has a process for working with the agencies on budget rollout. OMB gets to go first in talking to Hill staff about what's in the budget, but there are many subsequent steps that occur, including at your individual agency. But don't talk about what's in the budget until you've been cleared to. That is the cardinal rule. Solomon, you want to, as a former OMB examiner, do you want to add anything?
Well, and I'll add, right, double foot stomping to what Courtney said. And the reason, right, we just went over the laws, is the executive branch the law says executive branch speak with one voice. This is the way that we do it. It's not because OMB is wildly controlling. It's because the law, Congress said, executive branch speak with one voice. And I'll add that applies to any, after the decision is made, you still can't talk about what was considered before the decision was made. So if Congress ever asks you, and they do, right? I've been in the position where Congress has said, hey, what was your OMB request? I'm sorry, that information is pre-decisional. Period, full stop, end of sentence, right? And yeah, no matter what, even after the decision is made, you still can't talk about it. And we know that that's hard. It is also important.
It's also, I will also add, it's important to the Hill because OMB briefs the Hill about the budget just to give them a flavor, an understanding of what the key points are going to be. They do that basically right before budget release to the public. And so you want to make sure that there's not the potential for inadvertent, inaccurate information being given to the Hill, because the Hill doesn't like that. They want to know what the program, what the request is going to look like, and how the administration is treating the Hill's individual priorities by member of Congress. So there's also one other quick note, Andy. This is if we can go back one slide, or whoever's doing the slides. It is also true that the out-year discretionary data is pre-decisional. It cannot be released without prior OMB approval. That is a rule because that is the out-year discretionary data is what the president may propose in future years. And so you don't release those numbers unless somebody has been specifically cleared to release those numbers. Okay.
Oops.
Scoring. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Wait. There we go. Okay, everybody. Now it's time to play A11 Jeopardy. We've covered a lot of material, and let's just take a minute and see how this game goes. So if you would like to play, and I hope someone will play, please enter your name in the chat. Who will be the brave A11 champions who take up this challenge? Okay, Stephanie, Alex, we need one more. Or we'll just do it with two. Renee, all right, these are our three brave people who are stepped up to the Jeopardy challenge. So what's going to happen is I'm going to turn over to Stephanie. Can you please unmute yourself and pick a category and an amount?
I will do basic budget laws for 100.
Okay, here we go. Hopefully the click works. There we go. So the question is, what requires OMB to apportion appropriations and monitor spending, prohibit agencies from spending more than the amounts appropriated or apportioned, whichever is lower, and requires the agencies to control their spending and provides penalties for overspending? Please enter your answer, Stephanie, Alex, or Renee, which ADA, and that is correct. So wait, who got it? Stephanie got it first, I think. Okay, we're working out the mechanics. So Stephanie gets 100. Now the three people playing are Stephanie, Alex, and Renee. So Stephanie, we're going to go back to the page and pick. You get to pick another category suit since you control the board.
Okay, basic budget laws for 300.
Okay, here you can read the question and go ahead and enter your answer. Stephanie, Alex, or Renee. Ooh, go back and look at your slides. And I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds, and then we'll just, I know Courtney knows. All right, we'll call that a miss. And the answer is the Budget and Accounting Act.
Of 1921.
So let's go back to basic bud. Stephanie, you still control the board, so pick
Okay.
another category and
We'll do terms and concepts for 100.
a plan approved by OMB to spend resources provided by one of the Annual Appropriations Act, a supplemental appropriations, a continuing resolution, or a permanent law. What is?
And approved.
What do you have to do every fall? Hey, oh, so the onion user gets it. All right. We'll go back and we'll try one more. Stephanie, pick another one.
Okay. Terms and concepts for 300.
Means a binding agreement that will result in outlays immediately or in the future. This is a basic budget term. Okay,
Oh, it's an obligation.
well, some people in the chat have put the answer in. It's an obligation is the thing, basically.
Obligation, okay.
We'll do one more. Stephanie, you still control the board.
Okay, basic budget laws for 500.
This act requires that, except as provided by another law, an official or agent of the government who receives money for the federal government from any source shall deposit the money in Treasury as soon as practical.
Oh, miscellaneous.
Yes, you get it.
Okay, I don't know how to spell it.
Well, just MIS.
Miscellaneous Receipts Act.
Okay, so Stephanie gets it for 500. So I see a lot of people wanted to play. We'll think about the rules. Maybe we'll figure out a different approach to let everybody play. So this is something we're trying new, and I hope you find it a little bit fun. What we're going to do now is take a break for approximately. We'll come back at about 11, at 10, 15 or so. So we'll take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll move on and we'll try another Jeopardy round later. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you for playing, Stephanie and Alex. And Hey, Shalini. And Courtney, we need to go a little faster for the next hour to catch up.
Yep. We can adapt. We can do that.
Yep.
We're just so
Andy?
excited.
Yeah.
I would like to just introduce our ASL interpreters that we have on board to everyone. Just want to say welcome to the Bolas Hitchman and Mary Mullen. Thank you for your service today.
Okay, we're going to get started in a minute, but we're going to change the rules of Jeopardy. And this next time we play, we're going to open it up to everyone. And then Stephanie will ask the first question because she controls the board. But after that, anyone can enter, and whoever gets the answer first will control the board. I would also say, you know, all the answers are in the slides or in the information we present. So you can look back through your slides to get the answers. So we're now moving into part 2, and I'll turn it back over to Courtney and Shalini.
Great, thanks. On this slide has lots of boxes. We are not going to talk about all of the boxes. So if you, unless you have, you know, another 4 hours to kill or something like that, but we will talk about, we'll hit on some of the key points and the key concepts here. And if you guys have questions about other parts, let us know, and Shalini and Andy and I can take a go at answering questions. So let's kick this off. Thanks. Okay. There is a summary of requirements. This is, in fact, an important. This is important schedule-wise, in particular. This is about your agency's planning to get budget decisions from your leadership and for staff to take all of the decisions and put them in a form that OMB will understand and use for the decision process about what agency proposals are going to be included in the budget. So this slide, the quick summary of requirements is it applies to all government agencies. You're going to have multiple stages as you propose, as your agency proposes its part of the president's budget. The first stage is the agency submitting the budget request in September, usually the first non-holiday Monday in September. And OMB, prior to that date, will have provided your agency the format and requirements for your budget request. You will also potentially submit information in a second stage, and that's after passback. So once OMB has reviewed the agency's budget requests that are submitted in September, OMB will say, okay, this is what we think your budget should be. In the vast majority of cases, the agency's submission is often what is accepted. There may be cases, and in fact, there certainly will be cases where what the agency has submitted as a request to OMB, OMB will change that. They will say, this is what we believe the agency request should be for a particular program or project. So when you've got passback occurring around the end of November, OMB will, at the same time that your agency is trying to negotiate the final program levels for the president's budget, agency staff are also being requested to complete data for both the current year and the budget year. The past year data is already in the works at this point. There's lots and lots of stuff that is being produced by both the agencies and OMB during this time frame. And just to reiterate, OMB's decision is final. Your agency can appeal for a different funding level for an individual program, but you should choose your agency leadership will choose those very carefully. It is to their benefit not to appeal everything, because as the saying goes, to appeal everything is to appeal nothing, because OMB will say, nope, you're taking the budget that we have just given you. So Shalini, as an examiner, you have a lot of experience with this. So
what I'd add about section 25 is it has hard and fast dates. So please do take a look and know the hard and fast dates in section 25, because we all know that budget is a game of musical chairs, right? And the music stops and we sit in a seat. And so knowing when max locks is matters, because that is when the music stops and we sit in the seat. And you can have the best idea in the world 2 days after max locks, and sorry, you have to hold on to that idea for another year. And so knowing what OMB says, your agency will have internal dates as well, but the dates in section 25, hard and fast, super important.
Great. Next slide. Thanks. This is just a high level summary of some additional requirements and the policies and laws that govern the programs. So your proposals should include obviously good analysis. You want to be able to should be working as a team. Your agency budget folks should be working as a team to provide good analysis to justify the requests that are being made to OMB for budget levels. It should also pull in performance management, right? You've got the analysis, you've got information on how well a program is or is not working, and how to improve the management of that program. It's going to incorporate strategic planning, evaluation, enterprise risk management, and you also want to include other analyses and assessments as agencies go through the process of determining, okay, what are our priorities? What are our highest priorities? What are our next highest priorities? And what other programs do we have to pay attention to in particular? You will also want to demonstrate to OMB, if you're changing levels from prior years, you want to, if you want a big increase, for example, in a program, or if you want to actually reduce how much you're spending on a program, you have to provide justification for those changes and information so that your agency folks can make good decisions and good requests to OMB. You will also want to take into account any changes in how the program is being delivered, including advances in technology, which of course have been going around for years and will continue into the future. You also want to provide information on how the proposals will interact with other federal agencies, as well as with state and local governments and the private sector. In looking at those activities, is the government unintentionally duplicating programs that already exist in other places, whether it's state or local government or in the private sector, for example. Shalini, any color you want to add?
Yeah, I'd add this slide and the next one are really where OMB tells you what good is, right? So if you wonder, what do I need to do to convince them about my program? That I have a change, what basis do I need to cover? What are they looking for in terms of analysis? You can do the next slide, Andy. Section 31, so both this basis of proposals as well as these particular specific topics go through, and OMB tells you, hey, if you have something related to spectrum on number 12 or something related to full funding, right? I mean, please show us the full cost of your program. Or lease or capital assets, here's what we want to see. Here's what good is. So know your own agency budget guidance. But if you want to know what they're looking for, because we hear all the time, well, what do they want? They tell you. They tell you. And if for whatever reason you feel like it's not clear, I will emphasize what Courtney said in the beginning, is they want to hear from you. If you feel like this section, section 31, doesn't tell you what good is when you need to propose to OMB, that should be a conversation, because that's the goal of these sections is, hey, agencies, when you give us a proposal, here's what you need to cover.
And as you can see, there are very, in that list, there are very, very specific topics. They are, they're very focused on a particular method of delivery or program, and sometimes that's because there is at least one member of Congress interested in that. It is also because there are very specific requirements for individual programs. So, for example, there was something about spectrum auctions in that last slide. Very, 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 very detailed, but very, very specific to the FCC. So if you're not the FCC, you don't have to worry about that provision. So section 32, we're talking about personnel compensation. It just includes the provisional estimate. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, cover this if you want. So salaries and benefits costs have been an issue in every agency that I've ever worked in. And that is because we can take those monies and use them generally for other things, again, time, purpose, amount. And if we're over, we've got a problem. So being precise in our personnel compensation and our benefits planning is super important to mission operations. And knowing what is an A-11, where OMB tells you what the pay raise should be, how to estimate, right? Because we know we have a difference between pay raises being on a calendar year, but we budget on a fiscal year basis, and how to do that, special pays, how to do benefits costs. This is very detailed. You probably have people in your agencies that specialize in personnel compensation, and knowing this section of A-11 is super important to knowing full costs of your programs. I see the question in the chat on why do some government agencies pay more than others? There are so many reasons for that. So many reasons.
And they are individual to each agency that has a particular the different pay authority.
And all designed to help meet mission. Courtney, sorry, I took so
Yep, no, please. That's great. Thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, budget justification materials, basically justifying what the request is. So after OMB and the agency have come to settlement on most of the decisions that have to be made, agencies should immediately start putting together their budget justification materials if they haven't already by that point, because you're going to be providing materials that will be used by not just your teams, but by your agencies as a whole, as well as being included in the president's budget and going out to the public. So, and it's describing what is the program that is going to be implemented, how will it be implemented, how will it be implemented well, and how will the goals be achieved, and how will those goals be measured. So and there should be discussion of the supporting evidence for what is being requested in the budget, whether it's, for example, a funding increase, a change in a program, in how a program operates. So you'll want to be able to say, you'll want to have evaluation information, for example, to say, you know, we looked at this and these were the outcomes, and there may or may not be changes made as a result of those evaluations. Is the program hitting its performance targets? Is it time to change the performance targets? And you'll want to incorporate other support, for example, data analytics, for the budget that is being presented to Congress. Shalini, anything to add?
I will add that language matters, right? Very specific language matters. So you want to defend the president's budget in a way that is thoughtful, meaningful, and true. And OMB reads your CJs and will be looking out for language that undercuts the budget. So at this point, we're singing from the same sheet of music. Let's all please do that. And just to hit the question in the chat, someone had asked if budget justifications and CBJs are the same thing. Yep, depending upon your agency and your culture, we use congressional justification, CJ, congressional budget justification book, CBJB, congressional budget justification book, all the same way. They are all our justifications referred to here in section 51.
Yep. To reemphasize the point that Shalini made, this is not a chance to relitigate, right? A decision has been made, and your budget justification materials need to be consistent with whatever that decision was. Okay, next slide, please.
This is continued slide.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, it took a second for it to pop up. So there may be cases where an agency wants to, or has been approved to, has been approved to make a change in the current year budget. It could be a supplemental, it could be a change in how programs are operated, but you still have to provide justifications if that's what you want to do. And I will also note that those types of changes are fairly rare. So if there is a proposal for change in the current year budget, that is something that should be broached, not at this point in the process, but basically as part of your agency's budget submission. It should be as part of your budget submission in September. If there's a request for additional funding for a program, again, that is something that needs to be raised as early as possible prior to your agency's budget submission. And also want to flag that there needs to be a good justification for a significant change in how many people your agency has. All right, next slide, please. Thanks. This slide just lists the requirements for program justification. Again, it's got to be in writing. You should already have been working with your OMB examiner on this. This should not be a surprise to them. So any info that is required, and then the timing of getting the program justification in. Again, show the full cost of the program, and your request should be in line with policy guidance funding levels. And again, there should already have been discussions going on starting even before the September due date for agency budget submissions, right? So again, surprising OMB is never a great thing. Hey, Shalini, did you experience something like that during your tenure at OMB?
I think she dropped out for a minute.
Oh, I see. Okay, thanks. We can come back to her and see if she has any experiences with that. Again, write your justification materials in short, very specific language. Cover all of the programs and activities of your agency, because if you don't, OMB will find that one small program that you left out because you thought it was too small, and OMB will certainly ask questions about that. Also, use visual graphics to describe stuff instead of text, because the OMB folks don't want to read, 800 pages of material. And you want to prepare those materials in a way that will help OMB understand not just how much is being requested, but what will Congress and the broader public get from the budget request? How is that budget request beneficial to the program constituencies? And this should probably go without saying, but if you've got a program that is shared between between, let's say, 2 or 3 agencies, or if there's an impact on multiple agencies, the information that's being provided on shared program budgets has to go through OMB. There has to be a discussion, and coordination is really get approval from OMB on what's going on. But the agencies themselves should also be coordinating before making the request to OMB. And of course, there should be new appropriations language developed to support the new provision. And that includes GPs, the general provisions. So not just an individual request, but a GP. No, hold on, and we have a question. During this budget justification stage, is it mandatory for the agency to provide congressional impact papers? So not all, it is, I will say that in my experience, not all agencies are required to provide congressional impact papers. Shalini, are you familiar with those?
No, I actually am not sure what that term refers to.
A lot of agencies get, specific things they work out with their congressional committees and OMB, and that may be an agency specific thing.
And it may be very similar to a budget justification, right? That includes a budget justification that also includes things that a particular member of Congress wants to see in the materials.
Yeah, I think I've been part of agencies that have done particular views by geographic location or views by even congressional district. So that's pretty common. But again, as long as it's all singing from the same sheet of music, and you may or may not get those cleared by OMB. It depends upon your handful of things, including your level of trust with OMB. As long as we're all singing from the same sheet of music.
Yep, exactly. So there are, as you've seen, if you've ever looked at A11 or even just noticed during this session, there are lots and lots of materials that OMB requests. So OMB also wants to understand how agencies are making requests for funds for a wide variety of topics. So not just an individual agency's program, but they want to see, for example, on this slide, discussion about IT capital planning, right? IT is hugely expensive and can consume a large part of an agency's budget. So OMB wants to understand, what's the bang for the buck in the IT request. Let's see, investment control milestones. There are also a wide variety of requirements that are imposed on agencies, including, related, for example, to GPRA. So you want to talk about your performance goals. There's guidance on what should be provided for performance goals, measures, and indicators. evidence and evaluation. Again, what the administration is trying to do is provide the evidence for why Congress should fund something. Why should Congress provide the funds that the administration has requested? So that's why all of these topics are very important. Supplemental appropriations is sort of a side venture here, but in general, there are few requests for supplemental funding that appear in the budget. The vast majority of supplementals tend to be for natural disasters, and there's not planning ahead of time for those sorts of things. Agencies usually get emergency funding through supplementals when necessary. The justification materials, to the extent that there is any impact on taxes and tax expenditures, there should be discussion of that in the justification materials as well. Shalini, anything to add?
I just add on IT. Agencies can wonder why OMB spends so much time on this. One, it is expensive, right? And two, it's a lumpy funding profile if we do it right. We shouldn't be spending year over year the same amount of money on IT. So being really mindful about the way our agency is procuring, because again, remember, OMB is making trade-off decisions for the whole federal government. So knowing your multi-year funding profile here very much matters. And that's part of the why this is a specifically different thing.
Right. And in particular, you don't want to request and get a big chunk of money for a project in 1 year, and then the next year there's no funding available for that. That just makes everybody unhappy. I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but there are a number of agencies that have a very large, a very large space. Not NASA space, but space planning budget. Agencies can either own buildings and land, or they can rent, and there are lots of different decisions that need to be made as a result of having those options. So, for example, an agency headquarters may be located in a building that they do not own, or they may be located in a building that they own. Going into capital planning is probably another 2-hour class that is just to go over sort of what the different options are and how they're costed out. So we will, that's all I'll say about rental payments for space and land. IT investments. So this section tells you what you need to do for what the requirements are for your agency's IT budget and portfolio management activities. And that lets OMB see how much is being spent across the whole government by agency, and allows OMB to do analysis about whether they're getting the biggest bang for their buck. And whether there should be changes made in the procurement method or in the types of IT investments that are being made. And that's it. Shalini, anything to add?
Nope, just the it's important to get it right, important to work cross agency with your program office, also with your CIO's office, because we can have, just like performance, where I talked about the 2 parallel tracks, we can sometimes have IT in a parallel track controlled by the CFO. And A-11 asks for a lot of information. It matters a lot that the budget office is tied into all of that, because as you know, you're asked to explain it and sing from the same sheet of music, and it's all going to one place at OMB. So if you don't have visibility on it, you're not involved in that process, that's a good place to get yourself connected.
Here we are, A-11 Jeopardy.
Okay, so Stephanie, you want to pick whether it's 100, 300, 500. Now we're going to change the rules a little bit this time. Anybody, whoever's the first to enter in the answer to the question wins the points for that question. So it's not just
Andy, I got some quick recommendations for you. There are over 400 participants online. So when you change your criteria and you go for everyone, then you're going to see so many answers coming in that chat that we're going to have to monitor. And for that first round, actually, the first answer should have gone to Renee in lieu of Stephanie.
So should Renee get the board?
Renee should get the board, and for this session, maybe you want to keep it to 3. That's just my recommendation, because, and also if you choose to keep it as such, if you're not a contestant, do not put the answer in the chat, because that's what got confusing, is that you had others that were not playing the game that were entering the answer. So
Okay.
leave it up to you.
Let's try the 3 again. This is a new thing. We're trying to learn it through. So if you want to play, put your name in the chat real quickly. Angie. And I guess the other contestants should put their name in too if they want to keep playing. Sorry for the Bukasa and Stephanie. Okay. So trying to figure out the rules here. Stephanie, I'm going to let Angie, because she put it in first. Angie, go ahead and tell us which one of these you want us to play.
Thank you. Let's go right for the 500.
Okay. Where possible, include the blank of a program.
Full cost of program.
Yeah, who said that? Was that Angie?
Stephanie.
Stephanie, great. Stephanie wins that round. So from now, okay, I guess we can let people speak it verbally. Again, this is new. So do you want 300 or 100, Stephanie?
I guess 300.
A thorough discussion of this is both positive and negative should be included for major proposed policies.
Change in cost.
No.
General requirements.
No. Angie or Bukasa, I think the rules are once you take your shot, then the other people get to take a shot.
Oh, okay.
This is Angie. I already tried. So Bukasa.
Is it section 51?
No, it's evidence.
Okay.
Okay, let's try. Nobody gets points that round, and I think we're on 100 now. One of 2 things related to budget justification materials about which you should consult your OMB representative.
If they
Appeals?
impact several agencies.
Sorry, no. And these are on the slides.
Determine specific information and timing.
Correct. That is it. Who was that? Stephanie, was that you?
Yes.
Stephanie for 100.
Okay. So we're going to go now to, we've already done the break. So now we'll go to section 79, the budget data system. Courtney and Shalini.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. I'm
So-
just going to do, sorry,
Go
just a
ahead.
quick note.
Sorry.
Courtney, that I know that we're not going to make it through all the slides today, but I want to emphasize for our audience that the places where we're spending the most time, sections 1, section 2, and if we get to section 3, are probably the places where you are also spending the most time. These are the real depth and meat of what's in A11, and you will have the slides that cover everything else. So just a note about where we are. And let me turn it over to you, Courtney.
Thanks. I agree 120% with Shalini.
And your camera is not on, my friend.
So, thank you.
Of course.
There. Okay, great. Sorry, the sun has moved, so now I'm very shiny. So I apologize for if you're seeing this, and it's very reflective. So there, in addition to guidance on how agencies work with OMB on their policy, you know, on their development of policies and what the excuse me, what the underlying policy of a budget decision will be. Excuse me, one moment. There we go. Once or as decisions are made, agencies are, of course, required to put them into OMB's Max A-11 budget database, and there is a specific system that needs to be used for inputting the data. So Max A-11 is what is the application. We tend to call it a system, but it is in fact one application around the entire Max database. But it's the application that is used to collect and process the vast majority of what's required for preparing the president's budget, all of the data, the numbers, as well as the descriptions of the programs that are in the budget documents and justifications. So I'm very briefly going to go into serious nerd land. There are a variety of data collections that OMB that OMB requests for the president's budget. It is particularly important to hit the deadlines. If you think that you can't hit your deadlines, talk to your OMB examiner as soon as possible and explain why. And I mean, things happen. Decisions get made late. Policy officials are people too, and sometimes it takes them a while to come to, you know, for example, the OMB director and the head of an agency may take longer than expected to get to a decision and agreement on the funding level for a particular program. So just know that one of the key things to managing the enormous amount of data that gets collected and processed during budget season is do what you can as soon as you can, because there will be lots of rolling through. There are a variety of exercises, so things that you have to do to accurately present the budget proposals in the document. So there's the president's budget, the data, there's the appropriations language that's associated that supports the discretionary requests in the president's budget, and then the narrative. That narrative is shown with the accounts, and that narrative should be consistent with the amount that is being requested and the policy justifications that have been decided on between OMB and the agency, right? It's unlikely that anybody on this is going to go off and write their own budget narrative and how they think it should read. But there have been times when staff have, you know, been trying to help support a program and included language that might not have been, that turned out not to be as helpful as the person thought. So you should really work with the folks within your agency and be consistent with the descriptions of the programs and what those programs are intended to do and what they are will do in the future, how those programs will be implemented. It's very important that all of that language be consistent from your own internal agency materials along with OMBs, right? So you want to be consistent across platforms and agencies. There are also very specific account codes for putting data into Max A-11. I'm not going to go into great detail about that because that's a very specific thing and it's extremely dry. So, but there are very specific agency account codes. For example, the Department of the Treasury also gets involved in that sort of stuff. So again, it's important to make sure that everybody's singing off of the same sheet of music. Shalini, anything to add?
I'm going to say what you said. I'm just going to say it again because it's so important. The deadlines matter. The deadlines matter.
That is
A11
absolutely true. Yes.
is your Rosetta Stone. So if you were confused, why is the OMB account number one way, but the Treasury account number is another way? How do I read this, right? We can't cover everything that's in A11 here, but we can tell you the answer to that question is in A11. It'll help you with how to read things, how to do things, and being familiar with it. Super awesome.
Next slide, please. So you'll also need to use the guidance that's in A11 on development of baseline estimates. This is an estimate of what is in current law, not the president's proposals, but current law going forward. So developing what the baseline estimate is for the program and how much is expected to be obligated and outlaid or collected over time. And there are a variety of estimates that have to be provided into the budget database. That session to talk about all of the details would be another 2-hour session alone. So I'm not going to go into that, but just know that that you've got to put in data for all the way through UI plus 9. So 10-year estimates. And the rules for developing those estimates are laid out in section 257 of the BEDCA, and those rules were reinstated through the Budget Control Act of 2011, which I'm not going to go back and talk to you about, but just know that go to Circular A-11 and so that you make sure you understand what the baseline estimates are, where they start and where they end. Shalini, anything to add to?
In Max speak, that is Schedule S, right? And we do,
Yes.
and we do Schedule S, we do the baseline so that we are transparent. We talk about the full cost of programs and the full cost of proposals so that we can see the full cost of proposals. And that's why we do a difference. And you'll see Max schedule showing up in a slide or two, but that's Schedule S, and then policy is in Schedule A.
Yep. So S is if current law is not changed. A will include any proposed changes to those programs, because that will be the policy schedule. Okay. Yep, policy and baseline estimates, and you have to do that for budget authority, for all types of budget authority. You have to do it for outlays, and you also have to have the estimates of receipts, and the various schedule letters are included in here. And I think that's all you guys need for the moment. Combined Schedule X, again, my understanding is that there are usually at each agency a couple of people who are lucky enough to have the responsibility to put in all of the data into the Max database. So for many of you, this is not as relevant, but if you are one of those folks that is required to put data into the database, I hope that this is helpful for you. But basically, again, it's making sure that the database accurately reflects the policy decisions that have been made, showing you'll show the baseline, assuming no changes. The policy could be the same as baseline, or there could be proposals that will change the estimates of cost from potentially the current year all the way out to through BY plus 9. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Object classification. Again, this is this is one of the ways in which the government aggregates particular types of funding and spending, and how much is being obligated that will be paid out in the future. So object classification is a description. It's a way to categorize particular types of obligations. Next
And
slide.
you-
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
go ahead, Shalini.
Yep, you're good. You'll probably have additional information within your agency about sub-object classes or how to classify within object classes at a different level of detail. It all stems from that initial guidance in A11. So if you're confused about how something is categorized, going back to that can be helpful.
Yep. The same is also true for character classification. This is something that is very is necessary, but is not one of the, I would say, the foremost items that folks look at in the budget. It is useful and it is also required. It's not optional. Same with estimating employment levels, for example. Yep. And that is that there are lots of people who look very closely at how many federal employees there are in the government. Some and for a variety of reasons. Some, some reasons are related to, well, we think that there are too many people, and in many cases, programs don't have enough people to operate the programs. But it's also providing data. It is providing data on the human capital management and development objectives. So the government is being asked to, or is required to, deliver services to the public, as well as internally. And how does that how much does that cost? How much does that cost now? How much are you requesting? What level are you requesting? And what will the levels look like in the out years for planning purposes? Shalini, anything to add?
Nope, just again, stopping what Courtney said, there's lots of sensitivity around federal personnel levels. And so here's another place where getting this right matters.
It is hugely important. There are, I'm not going to go into each one individually here. There are a variety of other schedules with very particular information, some of which are applicable to all agencies, like the balance sheets. They're here, but there are plenty of other schedules that are only applicable in a to a small group of agencies. So, for example, there's a bullet down here on other special schedules about Schedule J, which provides data for certain types of special and trust funds and other types of funds. Not every agency has special funds or trust funds, so this may or may not be applicable to your agency. Schedule T is required because it's your appropriation request in thousands of dollars. That will save time by not going into too much detail on that. Section 95 lays out the OMB requirements for the budget appendix and the print materials. So every agency should be looking at this. If you're in the budget shop, you should be familiar with these requirements. Next slide, please. I will not go into great detail on sequestration, although technically a sequestration is currently in effect. But sequestration is canceling budgetary resources for budget enforcement purposes. So to the extent that Congress has placed limits on spending, aside from just regular appropriations bills, but there may be other caps that are imposed. If those caps are breached, then a sequestration must occur to reduce funding. There is a particular case where a sequestration is going on now, but it's very specific, so I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. But to the extent that there's discussion about sequestration, you should then become familiar with Section 100 here. That's all that I really have to say about that. Next slide, please. So as you know, OMB Circular A-11 is huge, and there are lots of other requirements. To the extent that the administration may want to transmit a supplemental or a budget amendment. For example, a supplemental would be if there's a natural disaster and the administration wants to request funding from Congress to mitigate the impacts of that disaster. That would be a supplemental to regular funding, so additional on top of the regular funding. The agency may request a budget amendment. If there's a possibility that your agency wants to transmit a budget amendment, meaning a change to what was proposed in the president's budget, that has to go through a very particular process. And it has to go through the president because it's basically making a change in the budget request. And that has to be proposed by the president. So Section 110 lays out all of the requirements for supplementals as well as budget amendments. If either of those may be needed, there will be discussions between the agency and OMB on those requests before anything happens. And Shalini, you've had to deal with a few.
Yes, and there is a really high bar for both of those things, a really high bar. And OMB tells you, hey, if you're going to come forward with these requests, please be prepared to answer, right? X, Y, and Z. Here's the format that a supplemental is submitted in. So it behooves you, if you feel like you are in one of those situations, to take care of the technicals, get your I's dotted, get your T's crossed, and here's what it's supposed to look like. Give OMB something that is easier for them to engage on the merits on, not the, oh, it's in the wrong format, I have to fix it before it goes forward. Because time is of the essence in both of those circumstances. And I remember, Courtney, one particular BOAC where I talked to you about a budget amendment before the president's budget was even released, and it went concurrent.
That sometimes happens, yes.
Yes, these things do happen.
Once the budget has gone to print, it is very hard to pull it back. So, yep. Fun stuff. Okay. I'm not going to, section 112 here is very specific to a particular situation. And you'll know it when it happens, if it happens. There is information in A11 on the policy, in a variety of policies related to investment transactions. The thing that you need to know is that agencies, this was actually a question that was asked quite a while ago. Can our agency invest funds in a bank, basically a bank account? And the answer is no. The government cannot arbitrage. That is not what they do. But if there are investments to be made, they have to be in federal securities. So that's it. That is very rare, but just keep that in mind in case somehow it comes up. And we are back to Jeopardy.
Okay, who would like to play in this round? Please enter your names real quick. I know it's been Stephanie, continuing. Anyone else? Okay. We're just going to play 3 questions this round. So Stephanie, I think you're the only one that's entered. Oh, here we go. Ogo and Angie. Okay, great. So we'll play 3 questions because we're running out of time. Stephanie, tell us which one to go for.
It's Schedule X.
For how much?
For 100.
It's printed in the budget appendix. And which schedule is printed in the budget appendix? and presents information on agency programs, the allocation of budgetary resources by activity, and the status of those resources and spending patterns. Again, this was in the.
Schedule P.
Yes, who said that?
This is Angie.
Good job, Angie. You got it. So we're going to
Thank you.
return. Angie, you have the board. Which one would you like to pick?
Let's go Schedule X 500.
All right. Is Schedule S, which covers CY through BY plus 10?
No, Schedule A.
No, that's not correct. Stephanie or someone else?
Is Schedule S, which covers Sweden. Oh,
Are you-
yes.
Okay, I think it's the presidential baseline data. So I think it is scheduled. I think that's correct.
I mean, Schedule A does too, so I'm
Okay,
sorry,
I'll
I
send
read
you-
it differently.
I'm gonna award points to both of you for that then, since there's some ambiguity in the question. So go ahead, and for the last question, Angie, I'll let you pick. And
Let's go ahead for 500 budget data system.
are used to access and to store and access data in Max A11DE, run reports, assign user permissions, and identify accounts in Treasury and OMB documents. What?
Account codes.
Yes, correct.
That was Angie.
Angie's making a run here. So let's go to the next slide. And now we're into the important stuff of budget execution. We're going to do this for about 10 minutes and get through as much as we can. Go ahead.
Okay.
Section 120, this is really important. Go ahead, Shalini.
Sure. So I will cover as much as I can. So one thing I will say, actually, Andy, can you go back a slide? One thing I just want to highlight about this section overall, and this is where so many of you spend all of your time, right? We tend to have folks who work in formulation, folks who work in execution, is that this section is organized in rough order of the process where things happen, right? Beginning with apportionments, going through an absence of apportionments, then getting to our 133. So we start with how we allocate the funds, how we report on the funds at the end, how we monitor our outlays. So just a note on this is organized in rough order of the way that we spend. Next slide, if you would. And Courtney, you want to jump in? Okay. So apportionments. Here's what's awesome about this section in A11 on apportionments. There are examples. So it tells you how to organize an apportionment, what you need in the top section, what you need in the bottom section, what line numbers matter, what the line numbers mean. And so your agency guidance should supplement this, but absolutely, like, hands down, to me, the best part of this when I worked in agency budget offices was being able to pull up the examples of apportionments in A11. And there's all different types, right? There's multi-year, there's individual apportionments, there's carryover apportionments. So the examples, if you have not taken a look at them, are particularly helpful. I won't go over what an apportionment is, but you can see that on the slide. So it's part of the administrative control of funds, OMB approved plan. Next slide. And there's an example of an apportionment. Next slide. Courtney, I'm going to go fast, so just jump in wherever you want. Okay.
I will say that I just recently on one engagement had to put apportionments together, and I'd forgotten just how clear the guidance is in here. So
yeah, it's really great. So I have often not created my own training on apportionments because the stuff that's in A11 is really good. So let's not reinvent the wheel when there's already really good stuff out there. A11 will also go through specific types of apportionments. What do you do under a continuing resolution? What do you do if you need a exception apportionment that your rate of operations this situation does not apply to you, you need a little bit more flexibility? You will find all that on, hey, here's what good is, here's what OMB needs to see in A11. Next slide, please. And this one is particularly important. We have spent a lot of time, particularly recently, in what do we do if we shut down, right? What governs when we communicate, how we communicate. You will find all of that also in A11. What do we do in terms of agency operations in absence of an appropriation? There can be supplemental guidance from OMB about that as well. They may put out a separate memo or bulletin. They typically will. We see Courtney nodding, but the overall guidance is here in A11. Courtney, is there anything you want to add, having lived through this painfully?
Multiple times. No, I mean, I think that is an excellent synopsis. Every agency is different in how in you know the funds that are appropriated to them, their use of those funds. The number one rule that we always told agencies when I was at OMB was, you know, talk to your agency general counsel, and as a staff person, as a budget staff person, you should totally let the agency general counsel be the one to have the arguments with OMB's general counsel about whether or not an agency can do something in the absence of appropriations and what they can and can't do. So I had to stay out of it and just let the lawyers fight it out.
Yeah, this is a case where we don't want to wait and ask for forgiveness, not permission. We want to ask for permission because the consequences of being wrong are super high.
Yes.
So in addition to telling us how to do 132s or apportionments, A11 also goes through and says, hey, here's why we do 133s, right? These are our Treasury actual reports on how we've spent our money. So it fulfills our requirements that we're reviewing federal expenditures at least 4 times a year, allows our monitoring of status and funds, and lets us see, here's our plan, and here's how we're spending our plan, right? And now, both 132s and 133s have long been public. 132s are also now public. So any watchdoggy person out there, general person with an interest, can come and see how is the agency planning and how are they executing. I think the next slide also covers 133s as well, and goes through, hey, here are the sections, right, that mirror a 132 in many ways. So oftentimes it feels a little bit like you need your own decoder ring to understand the agency to be able to go from 132 to 133. Next slide, please. I think you've just got a couple other slides on. Here's what a 133 looks like as well. And next slide. This one I want to make, the next 2 slides are particularly important. I want to make sure we cover outlays. So we don't often spend a lot of time talking about outlays in agencies. Sometimes we are predominantly concerned with the obligation, right? We want to make sure the money is spending. We want to make sure we're monitoring our delivered and undelivered orders, but the outlay itself isn't always the agency's foremost concern. It is an OMB concern, right? So that we can have that whole government-wide view of outlays and obligations. So you are doing these monthly outlay plan exercises, monthly obligation plan exercises, so that we can make sure that we don't have wild swings in our outlays. Because if we have wild swings in our outlays, what does that say? It says there's something programmatic happening that we didn't understand or account for, right? So we want to make sure we understand what's happening in our program well enough to be able to monitor our obligations and our outlays, take that same information and communicate it to OMB, because they're looking at the whole government-wide perspective on the deficit and or surplus and making sure that they're getting reliable information from each agency. So that's why we care about swings and outlays and obligations. The business should be there are no surprises. We do not, and the bar is high. We're not talking about a shift of $1 million or 2. The bar for shifts is high, but matters a great deal. Courtney, I see it came off mute.
Nope.
All right, and And this next slide. So listen, the world isn't perfect. We're not perfect. We are people, right? In the event that you think you have an Anti-Deficiency Act violation, there is in A11, the procedures for how you report that, right? Our goal is to understand enterprise risk management, understand all the risks happening around us, and knowing what you need to report, how you need to report it, what it looks like to do an ADA investigation. And in the end, if you did find after an investigation with OMB that there was an Anti-Deficiency Act violation, which Shalini's 2 cents, right? They happen there. The most common, this isn't Shalini's 2 cents, this one is actually data. The most common type of ADA is a violation of the purpose clause. And if you do the next slide, Andy, we see in A11 a blueprint of how we would report this if an investigation found that an ADA did occur. And then we figure out how we fix it. Most of the ADAs or ADA investigations I have been involved in have been around systems. Although there are willful ADAs, I don't know that that is the most common type. Courtney, is there anything you want to add on Anti-Deficiency Act?
Nope, thanks.
All right, and next slide is about our agency's administrative control of funds procedure. So this is where the Anti-Deficiency Act tells us we need to follow our own administrative control of funds. So that is not only the appropriation, the apportionment, but also whatever we say our funds control process is what we have to follow. And sometimes in agencies, we can set really detailed funds control processes, and that can make life pretty challenging for us. The goal here is a Goldilocks level of just enough control, not too much, right? And we kind of know that when we see it. So individual agencies, if you here have moved around between agencies, you may have noticed, hey, I know how to do it in the place that I'm at, and this other place does it completely differently. And if you move agencies, you know, I have several times. Number one thing to understand when you get there is, how does your administrative control of funds work here? And if you ask that question in the beginning, it just helps you acclimate to the environment. And I'm going to pause because you gave us 10 minutes, Andy, and the next slide is Jeopardy, and I'm not sure what you want to, how you want to.
So we're going to do three. We're going to do 3 questions. So quickly put in your name. We've got a battle between Angie and Stephanie here.
Andy, if you're talking, you're muted.
Shoot.
I'm
Okay.
not, but I can be now.
No, it's Andy.
Okay, now you're back, Andy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted. So, okay, we got Stephanie and Angie battling it out. I think Angie has the board, and I apologize if I got that wrong. So what question would you like, Angie?
Let's go CR 200.
You mean 300?
I'm sorry, ding dong, 500. Go big.
Okay. Their opinions hold that the Anti-Deficiency Act prohibits agency officials from incurring obligations in the absence of appropriation. And I'm going to give you a hint. This is a position in the government. It's an appointed, important, Senate confirmed position in the government.
The Attorney General.
Correct. What would you like for your next question?
Let's do CR 300.
A CR that covers a full fiscal year is referred to as?
A full year CR.
All right, Angie's. And your last question is?
Let's do 100 CR.
Is defined as the annualized level of resources that are available only through the period of time covered by a short-term CR.
Rate of operations.
All right. Well, thank you. Angie's running the board here. So we're not going to talk too much about federal credit. We'll just point out that, Courtney, you can talk about this, please, real quick.
Yep. So there are a variety of very particular rules for federal credit and requirements. So I highly recommend reading Section 185 if you have a credit program. If you do not have a credit program and you're not interested in it, you don't read it because it will probably confuse you. I'm a huge fan of federal credit and I worked on programs for a long time, but if you've got one, you know it if you've got it. Thanks.
Okay. Hey, now the federal performance framework, there's a series of sections. We're not going to go through these sections of the federal performance framework, but it is important to well, Shalini or Courtney, do you want to say anything broadly about the federal performance framework?
I'm sure. I'll say that the why, right? So the why behind all of this is, again, to integrate that marginal cost, marginal benefit. Can we tell what impact dollars are having on your program? And can we tell where your program is going, how they're going to achieve mission, and what those targets are along the way, right? Andy has laid out these beautiful slides with these steps up the mountain. We can think about our annual performance reporting, our strategic planning, our performance goals as the way we are showing our steps up the mountain. And if you were to look, if you were a budget analyst and you felt like you already had down the formulation section and the execution section, the next place I would say that is interesting and great for your career to go is this. If you could be the person in your agency who can tie together or help tie together performance and the language of performance with the language of budget, that is absolutely an asset to your agency. And this section of A11 lays out the language of performance.
The one thing that I would add very quickly is just that members of Congress may have a different view on the program and how it operates, and it's important to understand that when you're talking about the program or writing about the program for a member of Congress and or his or her staff.
So I just say that this slide real quickly shows what's called the Federal Performance Management Framework. It talks about cross-agency goals, the planning cycle, how to integrate it all together, evidence and reporting, and decision-making and learning to improve outcome. If you really want to understand how the government is trying to be managed, how OMB wants the government to be managed, it is worth investing some time to read part 6. Any comments quickly? Well, I'm just going to go because we only got 2 minutes. The last thing is these are the chapters that shown. And then the last thing I want to talk about is there are some key appendices, scorekeeping guidelines. And these are important because they provide easy to use ways to understand the different things mentioned here. Particularly point out the format for the SF 132, 133, because this one shows the crosswalk between the two. So we're at 11:28. I would like to first congratulate everyone who's on this call for making it through this very tough journey through the OMB Circular A-11. We tried to give you an overview, and you'll notice that as we gave you an overview of A-11, you also got an overview of the federal budgeting process. So hopefully this gave you at least a flavor of all the different pieces of the federal budget process, and it'll show you where to dive in to learn more. I'll turn it over to Courtney and Shalini for quick closing comments. And then I think the total winner, well, go ahead and make your comments, then we'll talk about the Jeopardy and we'll close out.
Shalini, you want to go first?
Sure, I just want to say thank you. Any of you in this room could be someplace else and do something else, and that you're doing this, it matters so much. We need you, we're grateful for you, and thank you.
I second that. Yep, I second that. And y'all have been troopers with good answers to questions and good ask, and you've also asked good questions. So thank you.
So I just put in my email, and so I'd like Angie and Stephanie, because I'm going to declare you guys co-winners. I'm going to send you both a mug. So if you will go send your addresses to andrew.pavord@fca.us.com, I will send you your mug in the mail for that does not cost more than $20. Also, I would like if you could put in the chat before you go whether you think the OMB A-11 Jeopardy was fun, and should we keep doing this Jeopardy in other classes. But anyways, thank you for everything you've been listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our wonderful presenters for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us for the discussion. As a reminder, we will be sending out a post-session survey at the end of the forum, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. I would like to say thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your day.
So I'm hearing that I'm seeing a lot of like Jeopardy. So I think we're going to try to, and we do, we got to refine the rules. This was the first time we did it, so we'll get better at it. But thank you again. I don't see any questions, but we're
Thank you, Andy. This was really fun. It was really fun.
Shalini, what do you think? Did you have a comment?
Oh, I saw a question in the chat on, hey, how long did it take to get the hang of budget? And I was just going to share my answer is about 3 years. 1, you're learning the whole first year. You only do this stuff at one point in time. 2, you kind of break even. You've done it once before, but it's your 3rd year that you can really anticipate. Carryover apportionments are due now. So for people who are type A, who are used to being good at things right away, sometimes budget can be frustrating, but stick with it.
And I would just add that you'll know a lot by the end of that 3rd year, but there will still be things where you'll say, oh, I have to go look at A11 because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ed. Sorry.
I think all 3 of us have done over 20 years in federal budget, and all 3 of us are still learning. So you got to keep at it, keep reading A11, but also read other fields. There's a lot of other fields to learn about: performance management, the history of the federal budget process, IT project management. There's a whole world of knowledge out there that we in the budget line of business are, in this and other classes are helping to give you access to. So just keep learning. So anyways. All right, I think we'll declare this a great session. Thank you, Shalini. Thank you, Courtney. We appreciate you. And Janice, I'll turn it back to you to close out.
Yes, I already closed out, Andy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.